Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today, Tim Barker, who is a business owner in the demolition space, and you're going to hear all about that, and has written a book appropriately named Boom, which is what to do when life blows up around you. So obviously, we're going to have a setback story or two. And he's also the executive director of ROI Ministry. So we're going to hear about that. But I just want to welcome you, Tim, to the podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a real treat. And everybody, you're in for a very unique story. Tim, why don't you start us off? We always start about as a kid, where'd you grow up? What was the family like? Were you doing entrepreneurial things? Was there faith stuff going on or not? What was it like in the Barker household?
Yeah, so I am a Southerner by birth, born in Southern California, San Diego. Actually, Chula Vista, more towards the border. I was one of five kids, and by the time I was born, the trailer was getting a little crowded in the trailer park we lived in Chula Vista. And so it was time to move into a house. And my parents, they really didn't have kids. They had free laborers. We were popular. And from that humble beginning to the time I moved out of my house, and my parents were, oh, you don't rent, you need to own. I literally moved out of my parents' house into my very first house, a 700 square foot, $58,000 home that was in a rough neighborhood, need a lot of work. But that's how I was brought up to work hard. And by the way, when I did move out, my parents had owned several homes and gave me a great work ethic. They never encouraged us to go to college or further education, which is unfortunate. I kind of had to go back and do that or after hours. They worked hard and had a lot to show for it. And so that's what they wanted us to do. And so it was really a unique upbringing. I was very fortunate to have great parents that gave me that great work ethic. And that really led to me getting into the career that I'm in today, believe it or not, working my way through college at night school, saw some pictures on the wall. Today, that's what I want to do. Big buildings blowing up and cranes, and said, hey, sign me up. I walked in the next day, talked the owner into hiring me. I said, if you hire me, it's pretty cocky back then in my younger years. So I'll be your best supervisor in 6 months. And I was. And about a year later, 2 years later, I was just one of his top project managers and thought I had it all figured out and was doing well managing some multi-million-dollar projects. As far as working my way through school, that kind of got put on the back shelf. As they sent me to terrible places to manage projects like Hawaii and Seattle and Portland, it was terrible. It was punishment. But I guess I'm just kind of getting into my life story now.
Yeah. So growing up,
Uh-huh.
what was the family business? Did they have some rent houses or something? What were they putting you to work doing?
Yeah, so my parents, my dad had a small business. He did restaurants, the seating and tables, and he was self-employed. Came from a few generations in the construction side. But my dad always said your day job is, that pays your bills. What you do with your time and your savings, your investments is what's going to take care of you, which is great advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put some in the market, but a lot of it he just put into real estate, started picking up pieces of
Okay.
property. We'd all move in, there's four of us boys. We'd all be in one room in this little house, and we'd fix it up and move to the next one. And by the time I moved out, they were on 5 acres in San Diego in a 3,000 square foot house. So worked out pretty well. And I learned a lot in those experiences.
Where were you where are you in the birth order of your siblings?
I'm the middle child,
Okay.
and that says a lot. Yeah. So, and as the middle child goes, there were times that my parents picked up all the kids from school, and I wasn't in the car, and they didn't even realize it. They had to come
Right.
back and get me later on. So I'm kind of a introvert, extrovert. Just I could entertain myself. Really kind of overlooked, and all the things that go along with that. But I have no complaints. I have no complaints.
And what was it I mean, I think a lot of boys, maybe I'll say, do look at things blowing up. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of us like blowing up things or whatever young, but somehow that poster. What do you think about seeing a building implode got your attention?
Yeah, I mean, just think about it.
Yeah,
Getting
it's a cool
paid,
thing to watch for
yeah,
sure.
getting paid to go destroy things. I mean, what could be a better job? I mean, it really is. And I have for a period of time, I was involved in most of the building implosions here in the Southeast when I moved here later on in life. The Dunes Hotel, when it was taken down to make way for the Bellagio in Las Vegas. Maybe more recently for your audience, here's in San Diego, I was behind the scenes as a consultant when the Georgia Dome came down. So yeah, it's exciting to be in that space. There's only about three people I trust as a consultant now. I used to be a contractor. I'm the one that owners call, typically Fortune 500 larger utilities. When they're losing sleep and they want something to safely disappear, you call me, not somebody to disappear. That's a different group we don't work with. But God has really blessed me to be a leader in this space as far as a thought leader and written all
Yeah.
some books and stuff on
And you
this.
and you really had your own kind of operating business. So when did you leave the one you were describing earlier and kind of start your own deal?
Well, now we're going to get back to my story.
Yeah.
So, early on, I coming from a family of entrepreneurs, I obviously, as soon as I had opportunity, started my own business. I actually moved to Atlanta to take down the Riches building as a contractor, and third generation company approached me about turning his company around. It's before the Olympics. I did, and it was a sweat equity deal. I realized I was doing a lot of sweating, hadn't gained any equity, really working against myself. And I was getting impatient. At the same time, my first wife, I won't provide all the details, but she didn't get the memo that we were settling down. And I'll leave it at that. And so here I found myself as a single dad with two daughters. And the guy, the reason I relocated my family here to acquire the business, changed his mind and terminated the deal. The only way to get out of it after about $50,000 of legal expense. And so here I am, a single dad with two daughters in Atlanta, Georgia, thousands of miles away from my family and my home. And I really, as I took a really hard look, it was my really come to Jesus time, right?
Yeah.
We say God's first and then our job or wife, excuse me, and family and then our job. But the reality is, the root cause of all my problems was me. And I had put that American dream in my 20s as an idol and checked off all those boxes, ran a business, had the big, beautiful home, the white picket fence, two dogs, two kids, the wife, beautiful wife, were in the front page of the local newspaper. But I was empty inside. I had completely sacrificed my faith and the things that really mattered to me to make it in this world. And I got there and I found out it was absolutely empty. It was just a void. And that was really the first boom chapter
Mm.
that just boom. And that was me through my 30s. By the time I was 30, checked off all those goals and I said, okay, God, I did it my way, that first chapter of my life. And that didn't work out too well. Now let's this next decade, let's do it your way. And that was very exciting. So after about 3 years, got remarried. Tina and I now been married for 26 years, three more kids. And then that led me to ultimately starting my own business, which I was very successful in. And but we got involved and equipped John Maxwell. We're training leaders around the world. He's partnering me up with other great business owners and mega pastors. I'm going to Indonesia, Russia, Africa, building up leaders. Life couldn't get better. And then I prayed that dangerous prayer. And I caution your listeners, if you pray this prayer, God will answer it. But don't don't pray it unless you're wanting him to answer. And it was, God, do whatever you need to do so we can make a greater difference, a greater impact. Because I was loving it. I found the joy not in building a business that came easier, but in making a difference. That kind of halftime principle. And I was very excited about it. We'd seen our local church just explode. Here we are making a difference around the world. And again, don't say, God, do whatever you need to do in my life so we can make a greater difference because he did. And what he did, I wouldn't wish on an enemy, but looking back 10, 15 years, I can only say it now without my wife in the room. It was probably one of one of the greatest things God ever did in my life.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit to
Mhm.
that period. You moved to Atlanta. Um, the divorce happens. That's always just a huge life event for
Awful.
people. And you're talk about maybe that period, in the ditch a little bit, and how you got out of it. So you did a good job describing kind of like that empty feeling, but where were you spiritually then, and um, what helped you get out of the ditch?
Great. I'm glad you asked that. Just remind me of some great things. So became a Christian at a youth retreat, which I love campus ministries for that reason. Just on fire for Jesus and read the Bible cover to cover, serving, having a great time. And really it was no day or event. It just gradually started
Yeah.
moving away from that, right? And other things became took priority. The business, the wife, the kids, all those things that we think are going to provide us happiness, and they don't feel that God-sized hole in our life. But during that reality check, after I lost everything and I found myself as a single dad with two daughters, 2,000 miles away from anyone I knew. I remember it like yesterday. It was Christmas, and the girls were going to be with their mom. I was going to be by myself, and I just said, I'm not going to have a pity party. I'm certainly not going to do that. I got to do something. I'm not going to just sit here at home by myself. And so I remember at our church they had this Christmas tree, and you could take a name off the Christmas tree, and it was a name of a family that the father was incarcerated, and you were gonna go, take some gifts to the mom and the kids. And I did that, and I get choked up even telling the story because I knew it had a way greater impact on me than it did on the
Yeah.
the, the mom and the kids. But I realized at that moment that it truly was better to give than to receive. I had never been so moved and choked up about anything in my life. And I'd given obviously larger dollars and things, but just that realization that we truly are, God created us to not just be about me, myself, and I. And if we are, it's a miserable life. And it's not until we take that focus on ourselves and put it on others. And even as I wrap those presents, I get choked up sharing the story, taking it to that house in the inner city, downtown Atlanta, providing the gifts. Um, I knew after I left there, I was a changed man.
So cool. I was just having this conversation yesterday with somebody about they were having this we were having a similar conversation about during a period of struggle, what got them out of it. They were kind of depressed and woe is me about, I don't even remember what the issue was. And what got them out of it was helping somebody else. And it's like their brain just switched to just a much healthier place. It's like God has programmed us that way. I mean, what is it about that, you think?
Yeah, I have a friend, you've probably even heard of him, Dr. Ron Braun. He's
Yeah.
written 5 books. He was a co-captain with Tom Azinger to bring the Ryder Cup back after we had lost it for several years, just getting in the head of the players. He's a clinical psychologist, great guy, great Christian. I got to talk to him about that, and he agreed. Actually, I wrote a book on this, by the way,
No.
what to do when life blows up around you, because one of the principles I share in the book is no matter what you're going through, no matter how difficult it is, somebody else is probably going through something worse.
Isn't that the
Take the
truth?
focus off yourself and go help
Yes.
them. It's going to help you more than it helps them. And again, psychologists, whether it's Christian or secular, they all agree with that. You can save a lot of money rather than going to the therapist. Take that
Right.
money and go help somebody else
Right.
and get involved with it. And when we do that, again, when we realize life's just not about me, myself, and I, we're not created just to just consume, 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 and try to impress people. And God's not impressed. As a matter of fact, you keep up with the Joneses. The Joneses care less. They're worried about their own things. So we get
Exactly.
caught in those traps, and it's just a miserable life. So again, I don't know if that addressed your question or if
No,
I'm
I think it is. I think it reminds me of Rick Warren's famous book, The Purpose Driven Life. It's probably my one of my favorite first lines in a book. It's like, it's not about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it just, so we just all got to kind of come to that place of realization and just get our mind off of our own needs or wants, probably more likely. But and then you talked about um, asking God this big question, right? Like essentially,
Yes.
do whatever you need me to do, right?
Yeah.
And you said that's a dangerous question. Why do you think that's a dangerous
Well,
question? Why
yeah,
was it?
because he's going to answer it. And
Right.
I still know. I have many rough edges. I was, growing up in Southern California, we did all that X Games stuff back before it
Yep.
became cool. It
Before
was,
they had a name for it.
yeah, yeah, it was just called stupid then, and my body reminds me of that every day. But I grew up on stupid. I mean, I've made more mistakes than anybody should. But I've got a lot of rough edges, a lot of rough edges. And when I said that, and it was right around the time I also was praying, God, break my heart with the things that break your heart. I mean, people often say, well, you got to give from the goodness of your heart, or randomly pay it forward, or all these kind of things that I think are really kind of stupid, to be honest with you. My heart's not that great. I get it. I'm all about generosity, but sometimes we make giving an idol. And it was like, God, what breaks your heart? Not what breaks my heart, but what breaks your heart? And then do whatever you need to do in my life so we can make a greater difference towards that. And so here we are, just serving God like no other time in our life, honoring my wife, my kids, church, giving, serving. And just out of nowhere, a major client doesn't pay me a progress payment. It's seven figures.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, I can make it through this. We're going to end up in litigation trying to get paid. Um, they're not just going to turn over and pay the bill. They had some other issues that had nothing to do with us, and just trying to figure out how I'm going to get through that. And it happens again. And this time I know it's fatal to the business. And these are
A
progress.
different customer?
Different customer,
Oh my
totally
God.
different situation, different state. And
Wow.
and I'm going, okay, God, what are you doing here? I had never had more than a few $1,000s of bad debt in my whole
That's
career.
crazy.
Here I've got two outstanding progress payments. These are just progress payments on pretty substantial size jobs for a small business, and they're seven figures. And the bank freezes the line of credit. A lot of my work, you have to provide a government bond, surety bond. And so
Yep.
the company says, no, we're not going to provide any bonds till you take care of these two outstanding issues. And so there I am, immediately out of business. And then over the next 3 years in litigation to get paid, selling off the business, uh, starting to, live off my 401k because I'm in interrogatories. And I knew so much wasn't at risk, involved that we had to win. Um, and just God got my attention. And I'm thinking, God, what do you, I know I had a lot of rough edges, and he was chipping off a lot
Mm.
of rough edges, sanding off a lot of, and I still do, but I'm like, what are you trying to get my attention for? What am I missing? And it was right at that time I found this research on Generous Giving's website, and it was called the World Christians Trend, Interpreting the Annual Christian Mega Census 2001. And Rick Warren, all the major pastors, mission, parachurch, church organizations were involved. Everybody wanted to see where the money, how much money was
Oh,
coming into the Big C church. They want to see where it was going.
yeah.
And I saw this on Generous Giving website. It said 97% of all Christian giving is going back to basically other Christian nations. So we're preaching to the choir. 2.97% is actually making it to the evangelized but unreached world, and only 1/3 of 1% was actually making it to the poorest lost. And I don't know what your Bible says, but I opened mine up. It says Jesus came to preach the good news to the poor and set the captives free. And I had just gotten back from traveling around the world 8 times with John Maxwell's organization. So the numbers now mattered because the people mattered. And so it just broke my heart that we talk so much about the world's poorest lost, but our walk's not matching our talk. If you look at our big seat, and I said, God, what do you want me to do with this? I said, okay, you answered my prayer. You broke my heart with the things that break your heart. But how do you want to use me. What do you want to do with this? And thankfully, that research also revealed that the 1/3 of 1% that's making it to the ends of the earth, the world's poorest lost, was seeing on average a 3,000 times greater impact. I'm like, there's the answer. So, like any business guy, I write a little white paper, and then I go out to look to see if there really are organizations making a 3,000 times greater impact than where 99% of all giving occurs. And sure enough, there were. And so I developed this top 10 list. And then I'm like, okay, God, if this, I'm gonna now I need to go meet with the greatest, most influential leaders that are head and shoulders above me that are either going to tell me that this is idea so I can get on with my life. Or maybe it was the reason that I went through this just to give them the information and say, okay, do something with this because I don't have nothing, right? At this point, I've got nothing. All I've got is God's got my attention. And so, and I'm going to mention some names, and you're going to know how hard it is to get a meeting with these three guys. I had meetings with.
Sorry to interrupt. Just for context, how long ago is this?
This was in my early 40s. So my 30s was about me. That was when, and that was easier when I went through that difficult time because when I looked, I could see the root cause looking at me in the mirror.
Okay.
Here as I hit 40, you remember the movie 40-Year-Old Loser or Virgin? It really meant 40-year-old loser. I didn't see the movie, but that's what I felt like. Here I'm the 40-year-old loser. I just lost my business. I'm serving God. What am I doing wrong? Just 401ks now, exhausted. We liquidated all our equipment. We had to move out of our house because we couldn't pay the mortgage. I mean, it was bad. It was bad, bad. My wife's with her 2 carat diamond rings and line getting food stamps. I mean, it's just and it didn't need to be that bad. Here I am working out of town with my attorney, sleeping in my car, just to save money. And what that revealed. Now, keep in mind, I've got a lot of wealthy friends, and my family has money, but my pride wouldn't allow me to take a handout. My proud and God was working on my pride. Up until that point, I thought I was a self-made man, which is a liar. We don't do anything without other people helping us. God says just being born in America is winning the lottery,
Right.
and so just God was working on a lot of areas on me. So that's where I was in my life. I was at my 40s.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and so then I'm like, okay, if this is for a reason, now I'm going to go see the three top people in this space and see what they say. So here I go walking off to try to see Hugh McClellan, Ron Blue, and the president of NCF at the time. So there you go. And you and I know that in that space at that time, I don't think of any other three people that are more influential or had more influence in the space of wise giving,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So you want to hear how that went?
Yeah, I want to hear how that went.
So, and really, it was kind of an accident, even how I got the meetings. I was up in Chattanooga on some business. God, I had taken a job with. I had first told myself I'd never go back into this industry again, and now here I am going back in the industry because I'd spoiled my family. They grown accustomed to sleeping and eating indoors, so we need to keep that up. And so I'm up in Chattanooga for work, and I go over to Generous Giving's building there, that 4-story building, knock on the door and just share with them what was on my heart. And the guy at the door is like, Tim, talking to you is like talking to Hugh. And I said, wow, what a compliment. He said, would you like to meet him? I said, sure, I'd love to get on schedule. No, right now. He took me up to the 4th floor, corner office, sat me in front of Hugh, said, share with Hugh what you just told me. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. So I go through the whole spill. Hugh gets this big smile on his face. He goes, here, I've got a ministry for you for my list. Opens up his projects. He had all these projects. He was doing a team working on how he was giving away $1 billion. You know the story. Your listeners may or may not, but here he is, 4th-generation company, built this massive Provident Unum Insurance, sells it, and now is giving away $1 billion to the kingdom with an army of people to do it wisely. And so that was number one. Get a breakfast with Ron Blue, share with him the same thing. David Wills over at NCF, and with all of them, I'm saying the same thing. Hey, you need to do this. This is what God's, and they were all excited for me and said, yeah, we are. So we are doing something. It sounds like God has laid this on your heart for you to do something about it. I say, you don't understand. I got nothing. You got influence, you got affluence. I got nothing. And And so that was the beginning of ROI Ministry, by the way. And
Yeah.
so that was that story. And you know what? You want to fast forward now to how that
Sure.
started? We got time. I give it to
Yeah,
you.
sure.
So God answered that prayer. So I was, as a business owner, we could write, 4 or 5 figure checks, maybe 6 figures over a year to an organization, but nothing, nothing massive or huge. And I was thinking at the time when I prayed that prayer, the book Prayer Jabez had just came out, right? Bless,
Hmm.
God bless my enlarge my territory, all that kind of stuff. Thinking, oh, he's just going to bless the business. That's how we're going to be able to make a greater impact, right? He's just going to bless the business. We're going to be able to write bigger checks, and that wasn't God's idea. He answered my prayer. So ROI Ministry, we started that just to encourage people to give in ways where they can make a greater impact to these organizations that are preaching to the poor and the lost, ministering to them at the ends of the earth, where they're not just seeing 3,000 times greater impact, but 30,000 times. We underwrite all the expense, so get rid of everyone's excuse for giving, right? We don't take a cut. We don't sell contact information, any of that stuff. And but our tagline is to know you're making a difference. And so over the next 10 years, we've seen millions go into God's kingdom.
Yeah.
I was never in a position of writing $1 million checks to charities. And so God answered that prayer. And he answered that prayer because I took what I went through, and God brought alongside or around me some people that were wiser and smarter in other areas. And we talked earlier, some that work for you, and we've been working alongside each other for the last decade or so. And so he answered that prayer, quickly restored the years the locust ate. Not only did I get back into my industry, I got back into my industry as a consultant, helping Fortune 500 companies work through difficult situations, not only just on the most complicated, largest projects in our industry in the United States, but around the world. And so he not only brought me back, but he brought me back as a leader in my industry, not only in the States, but worldwide. And so I'm the guy, again, you call if you want something big, dangerous, and scary to go away, not somebody else. And then I'll make sure we get the right contractors, they do it safely. And God's blessed me with really an unprecedented track record. No one's died on any of my projects or even gone to the hospital, which I couldn't say for 10 years when I worked at the largest design engineering company in the world. As I was getting back on my feet, they said, Tim, you can't say that because no one's going to believe it. I said, well, now that I don't work there, I say it all the time because they can go fact check me now that they're one of my major competitors. So
Well,
that's so with all that said, Jeff, I had to write a book about it because at the end of the day, we're all facing trials, we're all facing challenges. And even if you're not, if you're sitting on top of the world, that's a lonely place. I've been there too. And if you're not helping others in ways that matter forever, you're going to be a miserable person. And if you're in a valley and you're struggling, and if you want to find joy and satisfaction, or at least, get through that time, go find somebody that you can help, someone that you can encourage. And you know what? If you've gone through some really awful things, that might be the area that you're going to be able to help people in ways that nobody else can. And so said, I got to write a book about this, and did. God put it on my heart, and came out not too long ago, and we'll see what he does with it. So
well, shout out to Chip Brackley, who runs Arcos's Atlanta office for introducing us and being part of ROI Ministry. But I know you've done a lot of good with that. And you're kind of explaining some of these lessons you learned. But maybe to just take it a step deeper and personally, when you went to see these three guys and they said, "Yeah, we're doing it." I think that message was for you, not necessarily for us. Maybe it's an encouragement to them. What did that what did that feel like? I think there's also some kind of lesson it feels like in that about you know, you were kind of trying to offload the
yes, yep.
job to
So I can
somebody
get
else.
on with my life, right?
Yeah, I mean, what was that like to go, oh wait, the realization that I've got to execute this thing is for me, it's still helping other people, but maybe for a broader audience, just maybe take us through that period a little bit of trying to figure out what to do now before you came up with the website and all those sort of things.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
It was terrifying. here I was in a space, and you're only taking, I take encouragement by those verses in the Bible where sometimes, God will use the most unlikely, you
Yeah.
know, imbecile to do something, worthwhile. And that was me. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know anything about this. Um, this is all new to me. But God looks at the heart, right? We look at the outside and look at people what they have and for what they can do. And God just He had my heart. And so I just kept asking the question, God, what do you want me to do with this? And after that, I'm glad you brought up Chip Rackley because shortly after that, I said, God, if you want me to do something with this, you need to bring alongside me some
Mm.
partners and some people that can encourage and help me in areas that I'm weak. And I've got way more areas that I'm weak than I'm strong in. And so he did. Chip and others, David Mims, see his name all over town, real estate, and Bo Fields and many others that just came alongside, and more recently Chris Gardner. And so we, with their help and support, and we again started, investigating these organizations, started asking questions. Now, what's great, your cohort there, Alan and Catherine, opening up their process to us. They invited my wife and I to come to their annual retreat where they talk about all the things that they're giving to, and you're not supposed to bring your kids, but I brought my kids. I hate to be separated from my kids at the time because I travel a lot for work, and so everybody was just very very helpful. And very encouraging. And without that, I could tell you, I would have been lost and discouraged. And so it just goes back to, we're created to do life together.
Yeah.
And God hadn't brought people alongside to encourage, to help. It would just be, I'd just still be sitting there in that frustration going, okay, God, why'd I have to go through all this? And now I'm just sitting here lost. And so, yeah, so that's what it was like. And again, Hugh helped us with the top 10 list. And actually I reached out to Alan just recently. Him and Jeff LaChurch just said, "Hey, I need some help with something," and they were responsive. And so just having these resources, same thing. That National Christian Foundation gave us 10 donor advised funds, so we never have to touch a dollar. If somebody wants to
Right.
give to one of our top 10, they handle the money, so we don't need to handle the money or take a commission. And it's so funny, when I got those top 10 donor advised funds, I told David Wills at the time, I said, "Hey, David, thank you." I said, we're gonna I understand your model. You get like 1% of the donor advised fund, but when we get money, we're gonna grant it before the end of the month. So you're not even gonna see 1/12." And he just laughed. We're gonna get around your model because we want it all to go to the ministry. They had no issue with that whatsoever. So it's been people, again, just to think that those leaders would sit down with me and listen to what God put on my heart and to encourage me and then even help me, has been just such a blessing, because we're all in this together, right? We're just working alongside. God's given us each our little piece of the puzzle, and I think the research, unfortunately, the bad news in all this is that research was recently updated. That 2001, I don't know if you're aware of that. The good news is, in the last 25 years, giving has gone from 270 billion worldwide to over a trillion. The bad news is the percentage that makes it to the poorest loss hasn't changed one bit. It's still less than 0.5%. And so that has broken my heart again. And I know it breaks God's heart. And so that was, you've got a podcast, and so I'm, okay, God, what do you want me to do with this? I finally realized that's why you wanted me to write the book. I at the time you put on my heart, I didn't understand it. I didn't want to write a book. I fought it, and now I understand why you wanted me to write the book, because it's an expensive business card that I paid for, right? That allows me to open doors to get the word out about that we've done a great job becoming generous in this space. We haven't done a great job being wise and faithful to what Jesus has called us to do, to preach good news to the poor. So I guess this is my chapter 2 now. You're catching me at the beginning of it, and part of that is we're starting a podcast just like yours, because that's what
Right.
everyone told me we needed to do. That's been a lot of work. So I appreciate being on
You
yours
bet.
today, and hopefully people will check out ours as our first couple episodes. We go into those details a little more.
What's the name of it?
So it's just we're going to provide access from the ROI Ministry.org website. Um, But the first couple episodes is holy injustice.
Nice,
He
nice.
would present the problem.
Yeah, here's the
Second
problem.
episode is what Jesus has to say about it, which he does, which is great. We get the greatest commandment, right? To love the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, strength. And then in that, love our neighbors as ourselves. And we get a definition of the neighbor when Jesus answers the story of the Good Samaritan, tells us what a neighbor looks like, right? Poor, beaten, left for dead. Where the religious people passed them then, and if you look at the numbers, we're still avoiding them now, which is sad. But and also we get, Jesus, the Great Commission, go into all nations, make disciples to the ends of the earth. And so the research is showing that we're not doing that. So I'm more invigorated now than I ever was because I felt like after the last 25 years, we've done a lot of good in getting people to be generous, but not as wise as they could and should be. So hopefully the next 25 years, we get to move that needle a little bit.
Understood. So one thing that, well, first of all, where can they find the research?
Yeah, so roiministry.org
Yeah,
is our website. There is a problem and solution that touches off on that research, but the first episode that they go to is going to go into that. It's the World Christian Trends that was developed by Gordon Conwell's seminary. It's a 38 page book that came out 2001. There was 400 contributors, and then that same group just updated it here in 2025. And so all that's covered in the first episode, but you can also find it on our website on the problem and giving. You can find the podcast on our website too.
very good, very good. One thing that strikes me about your story is I think there is something about doing things together that seems like you're enjoying, it sounds like a lot of that early stuff, which is true for a lot of us, is it feels like it's about you and as you keep releasing things, even in the ministry, doing it with other people, you can tell that's a real joy for you. So I just love that example. And as we close, Tim, one thing we always try to do is, we got a lot of business owners listening to this, and they might be a little behind you on the journey, and and they're just trying to think about God's whispering to them, about what He wants them to do, and what's something they can do to take a step in the right direction to kind of down the narrow road tomorrow.
Yeah, nothing, and it doesn't have to be huge, but just the same type of advice that you and your team provide to people that you need to start setting a little aside and take that same approach with God's kingdom. You don't have to do anything huge, but it compounds, right? And so taking that, and the reason I love the greatest commandment, because when you look back, when Jesus reached back, Deuteronomy 6:5, the Shema, which every Jewish person recited every day, he added or put emphasis on mind. That wasn't in there. Mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And so the reason why that's so important is because what I've seen is most sincere, solid Christians that are wanting to make a great difference with their business, with their lives, they take that beautiful head that God's created them off their shoulder. And then they just give based upon feelings or a great story or strategy or and without taking the same due diligence that they would by using somebody like yourself or your team to help them look at their personal investments. And so that's a travesty. And so if they just approached, all that we profess as God's with the same level or just half the level of due diligence as we do with our own personal financial future, we'll see that needle move. It won't be 1/3 of 1% to the poorest loss.
Yeah, yeah, just sort of translate some of that business acumen to the giving in ministry side of your life. I think that's a great tip. And start small, and let it compound. So,
And use those free, all our resources are free. Use the free resources. Go to
right.
the extras. I never did anything unless I went and found people that were decades beyond or past me and asked them and listen. Said, hey,
Right.
what are you guys doing? And just listening to the episode recently of Alan's, their strategy and just how are you going about this and what lessons have you learned and what can we gain from that? I mean, we're all standing on the shoulders of those who've gone before us, but it's a shame to take the approach that I took when I was young and dumb, thinking that I could do anything without a team or without listening to others
Yeah.
and seeking advice. that's just, I've got a lot of scars. There's a lot of great stories in that book
Yeah.
of to do it the wrong way. But from those two, I became an expert, and that's what I get called into after somebody dies or there's a catastrophe. I get called in to take a look at that. What went wrong? What can we learn from this? How can we recover from this? So it's kind of interesting that that God has used that in my life professionally and personally. And looking back, even the things that I gained professionally on how he was developing me to then use those to glorify his kingdom through the ministry is amazing. I just go, oh, wow, now I know where and how I can use all these things. So everything that your listeners are doing now, they may look back in 10, 20 years and go, wow, God just wasn't developing me in my profession. He's developing me for my calling. And again, just don't take that beautiful, wonderful head that God's put on your shoulders off when you invest in God's kingdom, and be faithful in those little things, just gradually. Now, just like you're putting it into your 401k or your portfolio, do the same thing for God's kingdom. And then you're investing where moth and rust and market fluctuations can never destroy. And I tell you, I've never regretted any money that I've given to a organization, but I have a lot of regrets about some of the investments that I made before, you guys started managing. You guys started managing my account. No regrets now. You guys did a great job.
Thank you for that. Well, I just think it's a great encouragement to, sometimes we want to just come home from business and collapse on the couch, and but maybe take some intentional time to think about the ministry side. I think we can all learn from that. So, well, Tim, can't thank you enough for being on and sharing your story today.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate what you're doing.
And thanks everybody for listening to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Subscribe, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.